We begin in Nigeria, where one of the 4 students of the Catholic Good Shepherd Major Seminary, Kaduna, kidnapped by gunmen about 3 weeks ago, has been killed by his abductors. The 4 students were abducted on 9th January when the bandits invaded the school located at Kakao on the dreaded Kaduna-Abuja Road, Chikun local government area of Kaduna State. However, 3 of the students were later released following the payment of an undisclosed amount of money as ransom. But the 4th seminarian, whose name was given as Nandi Michael, was said to have been murdered by the bandits on a date that could not be confirmed. And still in Kaduna, some members of the Living Faith Church, better known as Winners Chapel, in Sabon Tasha area of the state, panicked on Sunday after a suspected suicide bomber sneaked into the church. The suspect, identified as Nathaniel Samuel, was said to have gained access into the church's auditorium before he was arrested. He reportedly concealed an improvised explosive device, IED, in his bag. Chief Security Officer of the church, Akpanyon Edet, said the suspect had been handed over to the police for interrogation. Meanwhile, the leaders of the National Assembly is set to meet with President Muhammadu Buhari over the tenure of the military service chiefs and rising insecurity in the country. And we have another story to add to that, the prayer walk organized by CAN and their chapters all over the country. Yeah. This is a pretty grim picture. I mean, we have this attempt to bomb a church. That's the only silver lining, that was forged. Thank God for that, because we can't imagine the number of casualties that could have happened there. But this tragedy of the young man who was murdered, only 18 years old, because his ransom was not paid, well, as far as the reports go, 18, and just murdered in cold blood. It's really alarming what's going on in this country. And we have discussed this last week ad nauseum, the service chiefs and their sort of outstayed welcome, I'll put it. Yeah. Whether or not that's going to be any kind of a silver bullet remains to be seen. But something drastic does need to be done about the security in this country. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you've drawn attention to 4 different stories. I think we can pack them into 2 categories. The first 2 dealing with the state of insecurity, the worsening state of insecurity in Nigeria. I mean, it's very frightening that, seminaries will be attacked, churches will be targeted. In the case of Nandi Michael, he was a student at the Good Shepherd Seminary Church along the notorious Kaduna-Abuja Road. And 4 of them were abducted, only for him, to be killed in cold blood. That will reinforce the impression, of course, that Christians are being targeted and are being persecuted in Nigeria, contrary to protestations in the opposite direction by the government. Then again, the case of the church, where a gentleman called Nathaniel went into the church. He had explosive device inside his bag. He left the bag on the seat right inside the church in the course of the worship, and then was said to have gone to the toilet for about 1 hour. So, but the church was, saved in this particular instance by the fact that the church is kitted out with, CCTV cameras. And it was on the CCTV that the security people at the back end noticed something unusual about him. And having beaten security at the gate, they now accosted him right inside the church and, searched his bag and find this, IED. And I think, that was quite a narrow escape, because we've had cases of churches being, attacked, either in Plateau State or in Niger State in the past, usually during worship on Sunday.
But this suspect is called Nathaniel Samuel. He doesn't have an Arabic name.
Yeah,
so
I found it curious.
Fit in neatly with that theory that Christians have been persecuted.
Yeah.
He has a Christian sounding.
Well, he has a Christian name, but are you really sure it's truly a Christian? Suppose he has converted.
We don't know. That's the thing.
And in any case, in the course of the interrogation, we'll get to know the truth. Anybody can disguise. If you want to go and cause havoc in the church, of course, you adopt a name that will allow you to fit into the crowd and probably join the worship so that you will not be suspected. But this is a very lucky thing. And I think that other churches, and other, people in charge of places where you have large congregation of people can take a cue from this. It does mean that, CCTVs help after all. The Nigerian government tried to put CCTV on our roads. We don't know the status of the contract or the outcome of, that particular effort. But it worked in this case. And I think more people can follow that example. These 2 other stories we can pack under the category of responses. to the state of insecurity in the country. First, you have the National Assembly protesting that they've been disregarded by the federal government. You will recall that before the last National Security Council meeting, they had protested and they had asked that the service chiefs should be disengaged because they can't keep doing the same thing and not getting results. And they urged, along with other Nigerians, that President Buhari should consider changing his security team. And then you had that Security Council meeting, and the subject was not even discussed at all. So I think it's a good thing that the leadership of the National Assembly, just in case the president is not aware that they are concerned about insecurity in Nigeria, they want to meet with him, and I think that's in order. The other point about the prayer walk that was organized yesterday by the Redeemed Christian Church of God, and personally led by Pastor Adeboye from the national headquarters of the church in Ebute Metta to Aton Cemetery, which is a symbolic place to visit in the course of that prayer walk, and then Yaba Metropolis. I think it's a case of the church playing what George Ehusani in a book of the same title calls a prophetic church, a church that identifies with the people, a church that seeks to meet the people at the point of their needs. And the personal example of, Pastor Adeboye, or Daddy Gio, as they call him, leading the protest and carrying a placard and saying, look, every soul is important to God. And all those souls that have been wasted, some of them in Aton Cemetery, Nigeria should not waste their souls. And the Christian Association of Nigeria also, organized protests in Ekiti State and in Ondo State. So what it means is that the body of Christ in Nigeria is rising up, is speaking up, is joining other Nigerians to say government must do something about insecurity in Nigeria. And it is not enough for APC, the ruling party, to say there is no part of Nigeria under the control of Boko Haram. People are dying from all kinds of cases.
Absolutely. This is a situation or situations that reinforce the state of insecurity in Nigeria that you described as nauseating, the amount that we've had to speak about it because it's so prevalent, ongoing, and nothing seems to be done. It also reinforces the narrative that we've been speaking about as well, about the persecution of Christians. And these are two very worrying situations. And once again, something has to be done. It's a sad story to start the morning with, to be very honest with you. Rest in peace to the poor man who lost his life. And, honestly speaking, it's so repetitive at this point. The exact same things continue to happen, and nothing is being done to ensure that it doesn't happen again. Prevention is better than cure. A situation occurs. You have to be able to look at that situation to know how to prevent it from happening again. Yet it continues to happen and happen and happen, and it's absolutely upsetting. At this point, something needs to be done. I'm very happy that last week we discussed the fact that the National Assembly have been calling for the sack of the service chiefs, or at least if they should just resign, out of, just humility at this point. You're the longest-serving service chiefs that we've had in the country. The state of security is not getting any better. Let's at least give the people some hope as a starting point. And
just before we go, let us also note the case of Mrs. Bola Ataga, who was murdered by kidnappers. Yeah. And two of her children are still with the 40 million ransom. The security agencies should please help and do whatever they can to make sure that those kids are not murdered. We go on a short commercial break now. When we return, the program will continue. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now to give us an update on business matters is Rotus Odiri. Rotus Odiri is Arise News analyst.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
So what's happening in the business community?
Well, so the business community right now is pretty much infatuated with what's going on with the Okada ban and took effect on Saturday, February the 1st. And what's been going on has been, what's been playing out has been the dynamics between demand and supply with regards to the public transportation sector. So what you've seen is that there's been a reduction in supply of alternatives, transportation alternatives of Lagosians to use, and an increase in demand for what's remaining. So by taking away the options of Okadas and taking away the options of Keke Marawas, all that's left now is Danfo buses. And over the weekend on social media, you saw crowds of people standing on the side of the roads, waiting for Danfo buses that weren't there. And you also saw prices increase about 2 to 3 times. And that was on the weekend. And so we're going to see an actual increase in traffic with regards to the number of people moving up and down this week, which means that prices might rise even further. There was also protests because the impact didn't just happen on the side of individuals. The impact was also on businesses. So in particular, the ride-hailing motorcycle businesses. There were protests on Friday where they were talking about the Lagos state government regulating them as opposed to killing them, because removing them from areas to operate in has led to a reduction in profit margins and actually put some of them out of business. So that's what we've generally been looking at as to that impact on individuals and also on businesses as well.
The state government has announced that a fleet of 65 buses will be introduced this morning,
yes,
with reduced fares. But the question is, would that be a replacement for Okada or for Keke Marwa,
right,
or would that translate into even more serious congestion on Lagos roads?
Right. So the 65 buses are clearly not enough. If you think about how nimble the Okadas are, they're able to move in between, smaller streets and get people to where they need to be. Also, the Lagos state government released seven destinations for those buses. 4 of them went to Ajah. I think 2 of them went to
Naira.
Yeah, and then 2 went to CMS or to 2 other locations. It's not enough to cover the amount of demand that we're going to be seeing with people who have been displaced that can't use Okadas and Kekes to now move around. So it's a start, but as far as planning is concerned, we would have preferred that these things were introduced gradually first before the ban took place. Another one is the waterways. I just saw that this morning. There's some posters now with the governor's face on them talking about a water revolution and some waterways that are being introduced. A month or 2 ago, Uber Boats partnered with the Lagos state government to test waterways between 2 particular locations. They didn't give us an update on that. And so now that this ban has come into place, how quickly can this waterway infrastructure be put in place for people to now use? So there's a concern as to this being effective enough to get Lagosians to move up and down. That's the issue.
But I want to ask you something. Obviously, the planning and execution do leave a bit to be desired. But what the government said was that this ban relates to security.
Yes.
Let's talk about that, the
Yes.
rationale behind it in the first case.
Now, the government's security justification has some merit, yeah? But if you look at the FRSC's statistics on the amount of, and now we're looking at accidents now and also armed robberies and crime. So starting with accidents, 44% of the accidents that we saw in 2017 was as a result of speeding, right? So that really had much to do with Okadas per se. So as far as speeding, that's, sedans and SUVs. With regards to crime, most of the crimes that were committed didn't really have anything to do with the ride-sharing companies. So that's the main focus here, is the ease of doing business and the fact that the ride-hailing motorcycles have not been allowed to operate. They haven't been the reasons for the crime that we're seeing. So what the business community would have preferred was that, okay, you exclude the unregistered Okadas and allow the ride-hailing motorcycles to operate in Lagos State and allow them to expand as well, because they've invested a lot of money in the States, as we've seen.
And in just a couple seconds, because we do need to round up, how has this affected employment as well?
Yeah, so for example, the CEO of MaxNG, he was on the Global Business Report last week. That company alone was responsible for 2,000 jobs and indirectly responsible for 70,000 jobs. So it's affected the employment status of a lot of those drivers.
Well, thank you for this
update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
So we'll take a short break now, and then when we return, Aaron Akerejola will be here with sports news. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Joining us now with sports stories is Aaron Akerejola.
Good morning, Tulu.
Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning, Radio this morning.
Thank you.
All right, Leila, good morning.
Good morning, Aaron.
Doctor.
Good morning. You know what I was going to ask for. We don't have much time, so I'll let it pass.
Okay,
Oh my goodness, you had a lovely defeat yesterday, didn't you? That is so true. I forgot to message you about
I've been getting
2-0.
barrages and I've been getting passion since I came to do.
2-0.
Since I came this morning. But let's actually now the biggest story. Usually, when the Super Bowl is actually up and running, every other thing in the world of sports takes a backseat, literally. And that was the same thing that happened this morning.
In the United States.
Not just in the United States. As a matter of fact, you will be shocked the number of fans they have across the world. Save the World Cup. I don't think there is. The Super Bowl garners as much as 100 million viewers around the world. And that's quite a lot. So when you look at it, put it in terms of numbers with the others. And this morning, as a matter of fact, it wasn't different as the Kansas Chiefs, for the very first time in 50 years. The last time they won the Super Bowl was back in Super Bowl IV. And this time around, fast forward, 50 years later, they came from behind, and Mahomes doing it and helping the team bring home the Lombardi Trophy and helping and also stopping the 49ers from equaling the record and actually equaling the record of the New England Patriots. So you look at all of this, I said to yourself, for a franchise that had started off on fire and probably teetered off at some point, this was actually a very good one for them, and they celebrated heavily. And beauty to be built, and it was feminism was written literally over this year's Super Bowl, talking about Super Bowl 54, being that the owners of the two teams, the 49ers and the Chiefs, were women. As a matter of fact, the halftime show, which is always a beauty to behold, was actually headlined by women. All right, a double act of Shakira and Jennifer Lopez shutting it down. Once again, it's always fantastic. We had coaches on the sidelines, which were always women, which were also women. So it was just a celebration of women, and a beautiful one, I must actually say, for the Chiefs and the owners, understanding that they have been part of that franchise since the beginning. It's actually a very, very good one to see them finally win something again.
Well, special congratulations to the Kansas Chiefs.
Yes.
To have been able to achieve this, and particularly to their coach, Andy Reid.
Yeah.
And also to Patrick Mahomes, who, for the better part of the second half, actually didn't play too well.
Yes, he didn't.
But he suddenly found the magic in the last 7 minutes, of the game. And then he was able to deliver. At the end of the day, 31-20. And then again, some concern about the behavior of the students of the University of Kansas.
Yeah.
I mean, the fans, went wild naturally. But I think at the end of the day, there was some violence, some disruption,
trying to overshadow it
on the streets. And then on the lighter side, President Donald Trump characteristically got it wrong. He said it was an achievement for the state of Kansas, whereas whereas the Chiefs are in Missouri, in Kansas City.
Yes.
Although he later deleted that tweet and corrected himself. But
so
it was beautiful to see.
Yeah, and one thing I must actually mention, the co-owner of the Chiefs, the Kansas Chiefs, Norma Hunt, she's attended every Super Bowl for the last 54 years.
Wow.
Amazing. As a matter of fact, she's called the First Lady of Pro Football. And she's been there. So to see her win this alongside the Chiefs for the second time, because her husband was alive, her late husband was alive when they won the first one. As a matter of fact, the late husband was the one that coined the name, the Super Bowl. And so a lot of history was riding on yesterday, not just about women. This is not just women who are just there for the sake of saying women are there. These are heavy hitters in the game of sports. So you look at this, so just a celebration of greatness once again. Time will not permit me to go into the numbers. But secondly, let's move away from that. Another thing, we spoke about the Australian Open when it got started. And like I predicted, I'd like to say this again, Novak Djokovic won her record 7th Australian Open. Okay, 8th one. Okay, thanks for the correction there. And of course, greatest of all time when it comes to the Australian Open. While Rafael Nadal is holding down the French Open, Novak Djokovic, the Serbian, has shown that no one can match him when it comes to playing in Melbourne.
So he moves up to number 2, but does he really have an anger problem? Because there is this indication that in spite of his victory, that he's likely to be fined, for touching the foot of the umpire twice.
It happens because this is sport, and because of the nature of sport, sometimes you actually the adrenaline that pumps actually might get to the wrong place, because that cannot be said of Serena Williams. When Serena Williams had the outburst at the U.S. Open,
she didn't touch anyone.
She didn't touch anyone.
At its peak.
No, I'm just saying that it's just natural with sportsmen, as against Andy Roddick, for example, in tennis, who was always smashing rackets at every given turn.
Exactly.
Okay.
Aaron, thank you very much.
Doctor, we'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.